Hey guys, welcome back. So in the last video, we saw the formal definition of an array, and we also saw how does an array look like in day-to-day life as well as in computing world. Now there was one question which was pending from last video, which is why should we care to learn an array? So let's discuss that question in this video. Now let's say we want to store 1 million numbers in memory. Now if we don't have an array, the only option that we have is storing it in a primitive data structure like integer or float. Now let's see how does the situation looks like when we use integer or a float compared to an array. Now let's say we declare 1 million variables of type integer and store all the numbers starting from 10, 20 and so on in these variables. So we are good till now. But the problem arises when we are given a small task of, let's say, increasing all these numbers by 1. That is, if we want to increase from 10 to 11, from 20 to 21 and so on. Now the task is extremely simple, but the problem is that we have 1 million variables and we have to access all of them one by one and update the content of it. Now that is a tedious task. So imagine we have to write 1 million lines of code just to update a number in each of these variables. Similarly, if we want to print all these numbers, still the same problem. So we have to access all these 1 million variables one by one and print it. Again, a very tedious task. So what can be done? So this is where array comes in picture. So let's say we have this array named ARR. It has having 1 million cells in it. Now in each cell we put the same value which we were putting in the variables, that is 10, 20, 30 etc. But the advantage with the array is that if you want to increase all these numbers by 1, it's extremely simple. All that we have to do is we have to use a loop and we have to point out the cell number of this array, and that is all. So you see that the entire operation can be done in just 2 lines of code instead of 1 million lines of code in case of variable. Similarly, if you want to print all these numbers, again we have to do is we have to take a loop and say ARR of I, that is the ith cell, just print it. That's it. So again just 2 lines of code and we are done. So you see that there was a big problem of saving 1 million numbers in the system. So variable failed in that case very miserably, whereas for an array it took a very easy effort. Now, does that mean that array is always preferred and we never need to use a variable? Of course not. There are situations where variable is preferred compared to an array. Let's see where. Let's say we want to store 2 numbers and 2 characters, 10, 20 and character C and character D. In that case we can't store it in this array, but we can store it very nicely in a variable. We can just declare 2 integer type variables and 2 character type variables and we are done. But in the case of an array we can't store it, and the reason is these 2 numbers over here are integer type and these 2 elements over here are character type. Now if you remember from slide 1 that an array is nothing but a collection of similar type of data. Hence we can either store integer in it or character in it, not both of them. In that case, if we really want to use only array, then we have to declare 2 arrays, one for integer and one for characters. So I hope that you would have understood the importance of an array. So the problem statement for us was to save 1 million numbers. We saw that the primitive data structures like integer, float failed very miserably, whereas the same task could be achieved very easily using an array. And the reason was that the cell number of an array are always adjacent to each other. So accessing all the cell numbers is extremely easy. Now if you would have observed one thing, that the array that we shown in slide 1 was little different from how it looked in slide 2. So in slide 1 it had multiple rows over here. However, in slide 2 it had only a single row. Now why is that difference? So that is a great question. Let's talk about it in the next video. Thanks for your time. See you in the next video.